And it should not be seen in direct connection with US as such, because sporadic incidents of violence, they have reduced, but free movement across the state, especially on the highways, that is still restricted, despite directives from the Union Home Minister Amit Shah. And extortion, arms and drug smuggling, they still continue. Intimidation of civilians, they still do continue.
He has also described in detail about Manipur some 2000 years ago as being part of the Kale Kingdom. The Kale Kingdom then consisted of Burma, Manipur, and parts of Chinese territory.
That area is home to an estimated 9.2 million tons of 0.104 grade uranium, which is very good, considered to be one of the best grades uranium for working, for power generation activities. So this thing also we see similarly the European Union being weaponizing the church to prevent any activities going on there.
Namaste Ankita ji and Manoushi ji to SmJ132.
Namaste, namaste everyone.
And Vadima ji too, yes, of course.
Pranam,
it's a
pranam.
It's a pleasure to have Ankita ji and Vadima ji again to our platform, and we are proud to have Manoushi ji into our platform for the first time. So before we start, we SmJ132 and our guests stand with the victims of Pelham terrorist attack, and our heart goes out to the victims as well as their families. So we say our pranams to them, and we hope actually the menace of terrorism will be stopped once and for all in our soil. Vidya ji, I'll convey the mic to you, and we can go with introductions.
Definitely. Once again, with the deepest condolences to the victims of Pahalgam, I would like to bring your attention to a similar situation in another part of India, especially the Northeast, for example, Manipur. If we consider the atrocities committed on the victims of Pahalgam as an intense act of terror by Pakistani terrorists, then the same can be applied to the lives of thousands of innocent Manipuris lost at the hands of Myanmarese terrorists, that is, church-sponsored super terrorists from Myanmar. Our topic for today's discussion is based exactly on that, on a book which is becoming a bestseller, The Manipur Conundrum, History, Exodus, Conversion. So today, this book that we have in front of us is the kind which has not been written before, especially from the Hindu perspective. A historical text on Manipur from ancient times till the present, which is divided into 3 sections. Who are the Manipuris? How are they connected to the warrior Arjun of the Pandava clan dating 5,200 years ago? How ancient are their roots? Who were the venerated ancestral deities of the Maitai Manipuris and the Vishnupriya Manipuris? What caused the innumerable exoduses of Manipuris away from their homelands? What created an identity crisis for them? How did Burma, Myanmar, present-day Myanmar, impact negatively the landscape of Manipur and the rest of the entire northeast of India? How has Manipur been dealing with the major challenges of illegal immigration, narco-terrorism, insurgency, land encroachment, and forced conversions, leading to a cultural cleansing of Hindu Dharma? These questions and so many more have all been explained in detail in 3 parts, beautifully by 3 courageous authors, Srimati Manoushi Sinha, Dr. Ankita Datta, and Sri Vladimir Adityanath, where the first section that deals with the historical and civilizational perspective is by Manoushi ji. The mid-section, which is a description of all details about Burmese attacks, the scenario thereafter, the British rule and post-1947, has been presented by Dr. Ankita Datta. The third and the final section, which is all about the untold story of the 2023-2024 Manipur violence by Sri Vladimir Adityanath. So before we get on with the discussion about this eye-opening, fascinating, must-read book, let me quickly introduce to our audience the three courageous authors who left no stone unturned to bring forward these raw truths to the citizens of India. With pride, let me introduce first Srimati Manushi Sinha for the very first time on this platform of Satyamev Jayate. Thank you so much for joining us, Manushi ji. Manushi
My
ji, who
pleasure.
hails Manushiji, who hails from Assam, is a postgraduate of English from the University of Pune. She has several credentials to her name: an editor by profession for several prominent publishing houses, a passionate history heritage researcher, a dedicated blogger, a best-selling history author, a certified astronumerologist and Vastu consultant, as well as the founder of myindiamyglory.com, which is an e-magazine that is all about Bharat, right from the ancient times till the present day, with special focus on its history and ancient heritage. For over 20 years, Manushiji has been visiting ancient historical sites, age-old temples, taking the effort to explore those places which are not well known, collecting extensive data for her research work. Manushiji has authored quite a few books too, which have been bestsellers for quite a while. Some of them are Saffron Swords, Part 1, which is co-authored along with Yogaditya Singh Raval, and Part 2, published by Garuda Prakashan. This book sheds light on 52 episodes of Indic resistance to invaders. Her other books of importance include Vishwaguru Bharat, Echoes of the Ancients, published by Subha Publications, and Reclaiming Mathura, Historical Analysis of Krishna Janmabhoomi, published by Garuda Prakashan again. Manushiji has been the recipient of the Maharshi Jaimini Award and has been honored with the titles Jyotish Bhaskar and Jyotish Samrat. Manushiji, it's indeed an honor to have you on this platform of Satyamev Jayate. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, moving on to our next two authors who are no strangers to this platform of Satyamev Jayate, Dr. Ankita Datta and Sri Vladimir Adityanath. Going ahead with Ankita ji, who hails from Assam. She holds a doctorate from the Center for Political Studies at JNU. Her research work has been based on the Vaishnavite movement of Assam, as well as the role of Satras that aimed at preserving the Hindu civilization of Assam. Her intense research for both Indic Academy as well as Indus University, Ahmedabad, got her to travel widely for the sake of carrying out extensive studies on the Shakti worship in the northeast of Bharat. Ankita ji, along with her own research work, has also contributed towards both designing as well as teaching several courses on the culture and civilization of the northeast of Bharat. Along with this, Ankita ji has also mentored students as part of the internship program under the IKS, Indian Knowledge System Division of the Ministry of Education. A committed columnist and an avid writer, Ankita ji writes articles in Assamese, Bengali, Hindi, and English, which are published in prominent online, regional, and national dailies, as well as in several online blogs. Ankita ji, Dr. Ankita Datta, it is once again a pleasure for us to have you on this platform. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, moving on to the last but definitely not the least, Sri Vladimir Adityanath. Vladimir ji, who hails from Bengal and was an engineer by profession, went on to become a dedicated and keen socio-political observer and analyst. A committed activist for the right cause, Vladimir ji, who had the opportunity to travel across the 8 sister states, Ashtalakshmi of Bharat, has been painstakingly documenting the atrocities committed on the Hindus and other Janajatis of Meghalaya, the changes in demography, as well as the destruction of native cultures of Manipur, West Bengal, and Bangladesh. Vladimir ji has compiled several ground reports based on victims as well as eyewitness accounts of demographic changes, religious persecution, revealing ignored as well as suppressed facts about poverty-stricken lives of the native people. Despite constant threats to his life and career, because of which Vladimir ji has chosen this name, which is a pseudonym. He not only continues to persist in this dangerous mission, he is also actively involved in organizing fundraisers helping the indigenous victims of persecution. Shri Vladimir Adityanath, Vladimirji, thank you so much once again for joining us on this platform. So today we have three very courageous Dharma Yodhas with us on this platform. We are so proud to host you. We cannot wait to hear from you. Ravi, I pass on the baton. Please go ahead with the questions.
Excellent introduction as usual, Vidyaji. Today's session actually it will be leading by Vidyaji only. I will just ask a simple question. You only need to give it a very short answer, since we have done multiple programs on Manipur. The last time that we did the program, the Manipur was still burning. The violence was still going on. And I would like to start with what is the current situation. You don't have to elaborate it because you may need to elaborate it much further. Further into the session, we may need to elaborate it better. But just want to know how it is at the moment for our viewers.
Current situation, if I may say so, is kind of a stalemate. A stalemate situation is going on. There has not been shootings or other overt instances of violence, but there has been an effort to keep this buffer zone and status quo as the new normal, to normalize this on the part of extremists as well as people with vested interests. And this has created a lot of problems. Precedent rule has led to a significant reduction in the rampant law and order issues and the desperate youth who were not able to get jobs. This has led to a bit of reduction, but the core issues of giving employment, ensuring that Manipur has free movement across there, particularly the highways being free, those are still not there. So it is basically a stalemate. Employment is not there. We are getting the increased number of dissatisfied youth. It is very difficult to go to Imphal reliably without flight. It is also creating a lot of people with vested interests are creating problems. Mizoram is repeatedly keeping the pot boiling occasionally, with some extremist preacher or other coming in. So the situation, unfortunately, will require decisive action. And local politicians and different kinds of extremists and people with vested interests, militants, this nexus date back to decade. And it's not just ideological nexus, it's a nexus of convenience, votes bank nexus, the nexus for earning money. So these things are not being addressed as of yet. So it's a very tricky and delicate situation still. But at least the violence has stopped.
All right. So getting into our session, I guess we have all the three authors of the book. So we'll start with their contribution into the book. We'll start with Manoshiji, and we'll go one by one. Then Vidyaji will have questions. So Manoshiji, so about the book, please do tell us actually, what is your contribution and what have you explored in the book for our viewers.
Namaste, everyone. Namaste to the viewers as well. So I have covered the historical aspect pertaining to Manipur, right from the pre-Mahabharata times till the last king of Manipur. And through my perspective, based on evidences, I have tried to debunk several myths. Like there is a narrative that the Manipur described in the Mahabharata is not the Manipur of the Northeast, but a small village or a small area in the Kendrapara district of Odisha. So that is one point that I have debunked in detail in a chapter. And then there is this myth. In fact, it is a narrative being spread across the length and breadth of Manipur and across the country that Hinduism was imposed on Manipur during the 18th century by a Vaishnavite saint called Santadas Adhikari. And that the then king of Manipur, Garib Nawaz, also known as Pamhiba, he himself converted to Vaishnavism, and that is Hinduism, and he also converted all the people of Manipur to Hinduism. Now, this is again completely baseless, because there are evidences of the immediate ancestor of Pamheba, that is Khagemba, erecting a Vishnu temple in a city in Manipur. And there are evidences of Garib Nawaz, that is Pamheba's ancestors, worshipping a pantheon of Hindu deities. And the Mahabharata finds mention of Raja Prabhanjan from the pre-Mahabharata times worshipping Shiva. And he was childless, and he, with the blessings of Shiva, he became a father. And thereafter, every generation after Prabhanjan, they got one son. And only Chitravahana, during the Mahabharata period, he had a daughter named Chitrangada. And we have several evidences of how our ancestral deities, like the Manipuris, they worship a pantheon of ancestral deities as well. All of these ancestral deities are but the descendants of Arjuna and Chitrangada. And they are considered as ansh of various deities like Surya Dev, Mahadev, Vishnu, Lakshmi, and they are worshipped. And there is also a narrative about Sanamahism, that Sanamahism is a different religion. But actually, Sanamahism is again a part of the Sanatana identity. Sanamahi was the eldest son of Atya Guru, who was again the fourth generation from Arjuna and Chitrangada. Atya Guru was the fourth generation from Arjuna and Chitrangada. And Sanamahi was his eldest son. There is a story about how Sanamahi was blessed by his father, Atya Guru, to be worshipped as a household deity. So that is also described in detail in this book. And then there is identity crisis of both the Meitei, the Meiteis also face an identity crisis, but the Vishnupriya Manipuris, they are very, quantitatively, they are very few in number. All across the world, they are just 6 to 7 lakhs. And they're losing their identity because they have, whether it is the language, whether it is the culture, they are in Manipur, they are not treated as Vishnupriya Manipuris, for example. In the other parts of the country also, they are sometimes they are called Vishnupuriyas or Vishnupriya only, not Manipuris. So there are various such factors that has affected the Vishnupriya Manipuri community as a whole. And all of these are described in detail. And yes, my ancestors faced exodus from Manipur during the 18th century due to invasions due to Burmese invasions. And I can say I myself a victim of exodus. We have heard about the several exoduses in Kashmir. The Kashmiri Pandits have been living as refugees in their own country, but they are doing very well. They have settled in various parts of the world, and they are doing extremely well financially. And likewise, Manipuris have also faced exodus from Manipur since the 18th century for several times. And while we describe in detail about the Kashmiri Pandit exodus, there is very less discussion about the Manipuri exodus from Manipur in the mainstream narratives, whether it is in the media or in textbooks. And in Bengal, we already know what is happening since several decades. So these are what I have described in detail in the first section of my book.
All right. Ankita-ji?
Yes. Namaste. First of all, namaste Vidya-ji and Ravishankar-ji and all the respective team members of Jyothi Clubhouse and our audience. Thank you for the kind introduction of our book in the very beginning of the section, and also for having all three of us together on this platform. Yeah, so the second section of the book that I've written, and it is all I want to say is that please do read the entire book, because it is not only about Manipur, it covers each and every state of the Northeast in detail, which we also plan to expand in the coming times. And the challenges faced by not just Manipur, but the entire Northeast. What are the challenges that this region of Bharat faces? Are they connected to historical dynamics, demographic shifts, religious conversions, all of them have been explained in detail. So the second section of the book, it begins with the Burmese invasions in the Northeast, and it goes to look into the historical and socio-political reasons behind the insurgency in the Northeast after 1947, but of course with a special focus on Manipur that has been in turmoil since the 3rd of May 2023, when violence broke out between the Metis and the Kuki Zo communities. And as Vladimir mentioned in the very beginning about the current situation, 2 years later, the state remains deeply fractured. It was in February, on the 13th of February 2025, that the central government finally imposed president's rule in Manipur after the resignation of Chief Minister N. Biren Singh on the 9th of February. But even under direct central administration that the state is now, the question poses, so whether Manipur is now governed by the rule of law or by the rule of guns, that is by insurgents and militant groups who continue to act with impunity. And President's rule definitely has brought about a certain amount of temporary relief, only temporary relief, I would say, because sporadic incidents of fighting, they have reduced. But as Vladimir mentioned in the very beginning, free movement across the state, especially on the highways, that is still restricted despite directives from the Union Home Ministry. And coming to our book, the available academic literature on the subject of insurgency in the Northeast, that available literature has failed to provide a holistic understanding of the historical origins of the problem and its subsequent impacts upon the society. So in this regard, various important questions such as how and why did the violence in Manipur begin 2 years back, exactly around the same time? Was this violence pre-planned? Who started it? Who were the real perpetrators and who are the real victims? And why could the government not bring the situation effectively under control? So these are the questions that we have tried to address in detail in this book. And history of insurgency in Manipur has been discussed in the backdrop of the state's strategic location along the borders of Assam, Nagaland, Myanmar, and Mizoram. And as I said, the second section of the book begins from the Burmese invasions of the 18th century. So it brings into light the violence that has been committed by people from Burma, that is present-day Myanmar, at different periods of time in history in the Northeast. So in this context, the focus is not merely on Manipur, but also the other states of the Northeast, which have equally been the victims of such violence numerous times in the past. Now, we all know, as Manushiji said, that we do not have much idea about the Burmese invasions, because we all know in some measure about the brutality of the Islamic invasions, also about the Portuguese invasions. But people, even in the Northeast, leave alone outside the Northeast, even in the Northeast today, they hardly have any idea of the Burmese invasions that were perhaps much more horrific and brutal, to say the least. So the second section of the book begins with these invasions, especially in the context of Manipur and Assam, till the coming of the British and the signing of the Treaty of Yandabu in 1826. And then it goes the post-independence era, that has been covered especially with reference to the loss of the historic Kabau Valley of Manipur to Myanmar, its consequences, and the rise of insurgency. Also, the increasing social and political influence of the church in the Manipuri society over a period of time, the problem of illegal immigration, a Chinese hand in the insurgency, the problem of drugs or narco-terrorism, all of these have been discussed in detail. It sets the stage. The second section of the book sets the stage for the part 3 of the book in terms of addressing questions such as what is a separate administration? So what is this demand for a separate administration that is coming up from a certain section of the people? What is SU, suspension of operations agreement? With Kuki militant groups in the backdrop of the Kuki insurgency? So all of these have been analyzed, because one of the central issues plaguing Manipur at present is the role of Kuki militant groups operating under this SU, that is the suspension of operations agreement, that was originally intended to bring about peace. But it is true, it is the same agreement, suspension of operations agreement, that has paradoxically enabled these Kuki militants to expand their influence across different districts of Manipur, defying both central and state authorities. And separatist aspirations have been systematically pursued through both overt and covert means, including propaganda, intimidation of civilians, extortion, armed aggression, etc. Because despite being under the suspension of operations, many Kuki groups, they have frequently violated the ground rules of this agreement. So arms and drug smuggling, extortion, intimidation of civilians, they were rampant even before the violence took place on May 3, 2023. But the violence of 3rd May, it was only a turning point. And it was not just it was not something that started randomly, but I would say it was an extremely well planned and orchestrated campaign against the native population of Manipur. So that's all.
Vladimir ji.
Thank you. I would like to begin by thanking Vidya ji, Ravishankar ji, and anyone who is listening to me. Thank you for the opportunity and the platform. Now, coming to this matter, it is very important, I thought, to mention we started the book with Saraswati Vandana, with shloks to Devi Saraswati, and we paid our Shraddhanjali to all the Hindu victims of genocidal attacks in Bharat, dating back to millennia. So, whenever we write the third part, one of our very important focus was that we have to tell the story of the victims as well as make it academically valuable. The victim stories have to be brought in light. So there has been entire chapter dedicated to victim testimonies. What it was actually to feel, how the situation was from the victim's eyes. Those things have been put. The violence when it starts, it first starts the third section with introducing what is identity politics, building on the second section. How the different names which people are hearing, Kuki, Kuki Chin, Kuki Zou, Kuki Chin, Mizo, how are these identity politics being played? The colonial uh, government and the church provided the base literature and justification for it. Now, how local politicians and other people with vested interests are playing on this. This starts that what is the ideological base of the problem. Then it shows that immediately after the creation of an ideological base, after the creation of an intellectual group, after books began to be written demanding a separate Christian country, Kuki land, Zalengam, it's known by many names, or land of freedom. What happens next? We see a series of violence. Sometimes it is ethnically motivated, like against the Nagas in More in 1992. Sometimes it is religiously purely motivated, like against the Tamils in 1995, the Gorkhas, the Mars, the Dimasas, the Manipuris in 2007 and 15 before 2023. So these motivational attacks are very cleverly cloaked. Ideologies are made, some political grievances are set up. Just like in 2023, we show the parallel there. How the strategy keeps repeating and how the response unfortunately remains the same tried and failed contain and buffer zone. And we try to find out how many lives have been lost in that even before this. It shows around, by conservative estimates, if we consider Kuki, Chin, Mizo, the 50 Janajati speaking different languages as one, according to the colonial concept, I am very skeptical about these identities. There is absolutely no basis about it. But let's, for argument's sake, if we take this one time, their victims, according to conservative estimate, exceed 150,000 since 1990, even before we include the victims of Manipur violence. So it's a massive scale atrocity going on, which has been unnoticed. Rampant temple destruction, rampant destruction of historical sites and evidence of other native cultures, like Subraikhong in Tripura and our Kobru, Tangjing, these things have been brought. So then we move into the current violence. We document the different phases of violence, the mobile military operations being conducted at first, then the stabilizing or the front lines become static. Then the switching of operations from across different corners with military precision. Then the strategic objective of trying to choke Imphal Valley out from the rest of Bharat and to control Bharat's geopolitical future, the Act East policy through More, Jiribam, and uh, Kangpokpi. We see strategic attacks along these transit routes repeated and desperate efforts to control. So this looks less like an ethnic violence and other things and more like coordinated military operations with clear goals to cleanse a selected section of population. And this is not just the Meiteis. This book also talks about the Gorkhas, the Bengalis, the other victims who, being non-indigenous residents there, are in a terrible situation. They are not able to find the footing to respond adequately, and very few people are listening to it. So we have also brought into it. And finally, the third section, we have gave you an example of a 70 square kilometer dharmic section. We call it departure of deities. How an entire dharmic ecosystem was destroyed, reduced to dust and rubble over 20 and 30 years of systematic atrocities. Entire forests wiped out, temples destroyed, atrocities done on Purohits, their children bought at gunpoint, extortion rackets, just like what we see in Bangladesh. These similarities are being hidden. We use primary testimonies to bring these things to light in the third section. Finally, a large portion of the third section is about solutions. First, short and medium term solutions have been well defined and given ideas. The long term solutions, we have decided to provide a vision for Manipur, well connected, rooted in indigenous culture and civilizational values which are common throughout Bharatiya subcontinent. Every community or people who has ever lived here have followed that. So we have a vision for that, and I hope anybody who reads that, important or non-important does not matter, get that vision and work on it. Try to bring our civilizational ties and bonds back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I pass on the mic to Vidyaji for questions. Vidyaji, go ahead.
Yeah, so my first question will be to Manushiji. Manushiji, you had mentioned about Vishnupriya Manipuris and Meitei Manipuris. How different are they from each other? And I also remember you mentioning about the crisis that they have been facing. So if you could throw some light on that, about their origins, how are they connected? Basically their origins, starting from Arjuna and Chitrangada. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so the Mahabharata, the Adi Parva of the Mahabharata describes in detail about Manipur and about the geographical description of Manipur. We find details in the Jaimini Aswamedha written by Maharishi Jaimini. He was one of the disciples, one of the key disciples of Maharishi Vedyas. Maharishi Vedyas he taught the Mahapuranas, the Mahabharata to all of his disciples. He had 5 disciples and Jaimini was one of them. So whatever he heard from Maharishi Vedyasa, he documented that. And only the Aswamedha portion is now available. The other parts have been lost. And Maharishi Vedyasa's Mahabharata is still available. So in the Adi Parva of the Mahabharata, there is mention about Arjuna going on a 12-year exile and he reaches Manipur. Before he reaches Manipur, he meets Ullupi, the Naga princess, and he gets married to her. And thereafter, he visits Manipur. So Chitravahan was then the king of Manipur. So again, about the timeline, if we consider the Mahabharata period, then that Mahabharata war took place around 5,200 years ago or 5,100 years ago, according to traditional timeline. And there is an excellent research by various scholars, and especially Sri Vedbir Arya has described in detail about the chronological timeline right from the Vedic period to the present times, to the medieval period. And according to him, the Mahabharata area flourished over 5,000 years ago. So Arjuna, some 5,000 years ago, he marries Chitrangada. Chitrangada, again, going back to the how Chitrangada was anointed as a Putrika, and let us go a little back to the ancient historical part. So the Adi Parva of the Mahabharata describes about Prabhanjan, a king of Manipur who was childless, and he did penance. He worshipped, he invoked Mahadev, and after several years of penance, Mahadev blessed him with a child. He also said that after him, every generation will have a male child. And it was during the rule of Chitravahan, that is, Chitravahan had a daughter, that is Chitrangada, and Chitravahan anointed her as a Putrika. That means if Raja Chitravahan died, then Chitrangada would be the ruler of Manipur. And after Chitrangada marries, her first male child would be the king of Manipur. So when Arjuna asked Chitravahan for Chitrangada's hand, introducing himself as a Kuru prince, Chitravahan agreed with that particular condition, that if they have a son, then that son should be the king of Manipur, and Arjuna agreed. And after some 2-3 years, Arjuna and Chitrangada had a son named Babrubahan, and thereafter Arjuna left Manipur and he visited the other places and came back to Hastinapura. And there is not much detail about whether Arjuna was in touch with Babrubahan and Chitrangada, but the Aswamedha Parva of the Mahabharata tells in detail again about how the Aswamedha horse reaches Manipur, and there was a battle between Arjuna and Babrubahan. And before the Aswamedha horse reaches Manipur, it it goes through Rakkaspura. In the Mahabharata period, Burma was known as Rakkaspura. Myanmar, that is Burma, that was known as Rakkaspura in ancient times, and that was again a part of Aryabrat, that is Bharatvarsha. And Babrubahan knew that Arjuna was his father, so he was not ready for a battle against his father, but it was Arjuna who forced him as a Kshatriya that he should fight. And it was a stalemate. Neither Arjuna nor Babrubahan won the battle, and they fell unconscious. And Babrubahan regained his consciousness, and with the help of Ulupi, Arjuna regained consciousness. So thereafter, Babrubahan married Savitri, and their child was Dattamani. Dattamani married Jyotheswari, and Dattamani and Jyotheswari had a child called Atyaguru. Atyaguru married Sabirai Panthobi, Leisang Khombi, Changhim Khombi, Pramila, and Urmila. And Sabirai Panthobi's children were Sanamahi and Pakhangba. Sanamahi was the eldest, and Pakhangba was the youngest. And the other children were Angom, Luang, Moirang, and Mangang. The Mangangs were later known as Ningthosas, and Ningthosas were later known as Meiteis. And the Vishnupriya Manipuris were again the descendants of Pakhamba. Pakhamba had one son. He was called Kumal Guru, and he was also known as Apokpa. So the Kumals, the Vishnupriya Manipuris are the descendants of Kumal. So Meiteis trace their ancestry to Mangang, and Vishnupriyas trace their ancestry to Kumal Guru. That is Apokpa. And we worship Apokpa as the earliest ancestor. And Vishnupriya Manipuris, they worship Apokpa as the earliest ancestor, and the Apokpa is worshipped in granaries in the villages. And in the cities and towns, every 3 to 4 generations, they together worship Apokpa at one ancestral place. So every year, whenever there is a puja, worshipping is done, all the family members from all the 4 or 5 generations or descendants, they visit the ancestral house and they worship. And the Meitei Manipuris, they worship 3 Apokpas. The eldest Apokpa, the clan ancestor, and their Apokpa that is 5 generations ahead, the ancestor, and the immediate ancestor that is also known as Apokpa. And then thereafter, besides the worshipping of Apokpa, Sanamahi, both the Vishnupriyas and Meiteis worship a pantheon of more ancestral deities who are again all the descendants of Arjuna and Chitrangada. And I hope I answered your question, the origin of the Vishnupriyas and Meiteis.
Yes, beautifully, Manushiji. It was, we can.
So there is again why. Yeah, I'll add one point. Why Sanamahi is considered a household deity. There is again this, we know the story of Kartikeya and Ganesha, how when they grew, when they were adults and both of them wanted to get married, and then Shiva and Parvati said that whoever circumambulates the universe and comes back first would get married first. And Kartikeya went away with the pickup, went on the peacock, and Ganesha, he circumambulated his parents, and saying his wisdom, Shiva blessed him and he was married first. And later on, when Kartikeya arrived, he was infuriated, saying Ganesha being married. And similarly, there is a similar story in the Kumal Purana also about Sanamahi and his brothers. The Kumal Purana describes in detail about all the 6 children of Atya Guru and his 5 wives. So Sanamahi was the eldest. So when they grew up, because there were 6 sons, only one should be the king of Manipur. So Atya Guru and his wives, they decided that to send their children to circumambulate the world. And whoever comes back first would be made the king of Manipur. So all the first 5 children, elder 5 children, they went away, and the youngest, he circumambulated his father's, when the father was early morning, when he was on his bed and he was awake, the youngest son, that is Pakhamba, he circumambulated his father. And the Atya Guru, he made him the king of Manipur. By the time the other children arrived, Sanamahi was the first to arrive, and he got very angry. He was about to strike his brother when Atya Guru intercepted, and he blessed him that from thence onwards he would be worshipped in every home of Manipur, that he would be worshipped as a household deity. And since that time, Sanamahi has been worshipped as a household deity in every house of Manipur, in every Manipuri home, whether it is the Vishnupriya Manipuris or the Meitei Manipuris. And in the first section, I have described in detail about all these 5 principal clans of the Manipuris. Like as I said, the Mangangs were later known as Ningthozas, and then later they were known as Meiteis. So similarly, there were Moirangs, there were Angoms, Luangs, then Khumals. I've described in detail about all of these clans. And yes.
Absolutely fascinating, Manushiji. I know our readers should read this. This is the only way they'll come to know such a vibrant, rich culture that we have. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. So, Ravi, would you like to take the next question, or you would want me to go ahead with Ankita ji? I'll go ahead. Okay. So, next question, I'll give it to.
No, you can also ask the next question also to Manushi ji. There's no issue.
Okay, I thought we would have, one question for each of you all,
Yeah, please continue. Ask Vladimir also and Ankita also. That will
So I'll ask the next question to you, Ankita ji, then Vladimir ji, and then back to Manushi ji, if that's okay with all 3 of you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So Coming back to uh, Ankita ji, they have mentioned that we had about 8 Christians in Manipur in 1901. And from there, it has gone up to 11.79 lakh Christians in 2011. With the steep decline in the numbers of Manipuri Hindus literally every decade, definitely there has been consistent conversion activities going on in full swing. Could you throw some light on that, Ankita?
Definitely. This needs to be read in the context of illegal immigration. Conversions have been, there is an active conversion racket that is running in Manipur since a long time now. Manipur is today confronting an existential crisis. The unchecked activities of the church with huge sponsors from abroad and the unchecked activities of the militants as well, often described as narco-terrorists, they have continued to endanger the peace and security and integrity of the state. The influence of the church today permeates various civil society organizations in Manipur, politics, and even cultural institutions. There is an entire chapter on illegal immigration in the book that brings home the point that illegal immigration into Bharat is not just happening from Bangladesh, but also from other countries. So much so that the population of immigrants, and these immigrants are from a certain religion, their population has outnumbered so many indigenous communities in Manipur today. And if we look into the current situation, just a few days back, several cookie zoo organizations had issued strict warnings to the Metis against the observance of the age-old Thangjing Hill pilgrimage. This Thangjing Hill pilgrimage is a sacred ritual which is undertaken by the Manipuri Hindus annually during the Cherauba festival, that is their New Year, the Manipuri New Year in the month of April. And this shows that their agitation and protests by the Christian Kukizos against this sacred age-old ritual, it is a direct assault on the Hindu culture and civilization of Manipur, right? So this needs to be read in the context of conversions and illegal immigration. It needs to be read together, because the abnormal population growth rate of the illegal immigrants of a certain religious community, it has disturbed the pre-existing status quo and demographic balance in Manipur today among the native inhabitants. They have been grabbing lands, they have been owning properties. New churches are coming up in different places. They are also competing for jobs. They are supplying cheap labor. They are controlling the economy. They are controlling markets. They are influencing administrative policies. They are dominating electoral politics. They're just there everywhere. They are creating social instabilities, and not just that, they are destroying the ecosystem. They are destroying forests. They are causing destruction to the ecological harmony, and besides leading to the displacement of indigenous inhabitants and their villages. And this trend in Manipur has continued since the British colonial period. So all we want is that the central government should not delay much, because the longer the central government delays taking stringent actions, the more emboldened these people and their activities will become in the times to come. So Vladimir can throw further more light.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you, Ankita ji. Vladimir ji, would you like to continue with what Ankita ji was saying? Go ahead.
No, she mostly covered the illegal immigration, and yes, illegal immigration has had the geopolitical backing from various foreign countries of the West, including USA, including UK. Lot of church groups nearby in countries like Burma, particularly the Indo-Burma Partnership Mission groups, they have played a major role allegedly in. I am telling allegedly, but it's just for cosmetics. There is plenty of circumstantial evidence on that. So that they have played a role. So these illegal immigration is not because of seeking refuge or something. This is a part of a large portion of this illegal immigration was done as a coordinated strategy against Bharat, as a geopolitical tool to conduct demographic warfare. This makes it even more dangerous because after coming here, they will not go desperately looking for supplies or something. They will sit coordinatedly, well planned locations, work under a well-planned strategy orchestrated using think tanks, global think tanks who know what they are doing. So this makes it even more dangerous.
Okay, so Vladimir ji, this question is for you. So would you say that some of these so-called intellectuals, okay, as well as local politicians, whether have they been found to have alleged links with these insurgent groups? And if you feel comfortable, please do go ahead and share details on this. You can be
Sure.
as yeah. Go ahead.
There is a saying once some of the politicians said regarding this is again not just related to Manipur, related to Northeast. We give them the central budget allocated, they do not even attend the meeting. They merely take the money and distribute it to us and tell us, we will vote for you, you leave us how we spend our money. So this level of unaccountability and disconnect from the people is present in many parts of Northeast, not just Manipur. And insurgents ultimately have become a very good source of muscle power to threaten people and buy votes. So this insurgent politician nexus goes across communities, irrespective of community or religion. But there is an additional dimension here. What we see politicians like Pauline Lial Hauke and other people openly indulging in anti-national narratives like LM Khaute, videos and desperate victims from Churachandpur say that when initially the violence started at April 27th, the stone pelting and other atrocities, he simply took a vehicle and ran away, took a Z-grade security, leaving the people, 4 or 5% people in front of a population baying for their blood. So these kind of the same LM Khaute we see, the 10 terrorists who came into murder innocent people, internally displaced people in Jiribam, who were thankfully neutralized by our CRPF. He calls them martyrs while being a former IPS officer. So these are some examples which we see of not just involvement, but people prioritizing ethnic interests over national interests. And people actually merely taking separate, these are separatist things, treasonous activities. So we see such elected representatives indulging in treasonous activities. And these treasonous activities go beyond political lines. This is not a political issue. This is a geopolitical issue with strong ethnic and religious lines. So this is the problem. We see repeatedly terrorists and other groups invoking the name of Christ to do atrocities, KNF and other groups. We see repeatedly ethnic lines being pushed that prioritize ethnicity over national interests, prioritize ethnic politics over cultural and civilizational values, prioritize ethnic politics over nationality. This is a common theme which we see being circulated repeatedly. So these themes cannot be circulated without the backing of the influential politicians and organizations posing as civil society organizations but are anything but. We see civil society organizations like the World Cookizo Intellectual Council. They sent letters to foreign countries asking for an invasion of Bharat, literally. They sent to UK, they sent to Israel, they sent to Germany. So we see basically they are becoming hired guns for a suitable price against Bharat. So this is the extent to which the damage has been done. And that is why we are immediately calling that precedent rule should have value for time. There should be decisive action taken against these local politician and insurgent nexus irrespective of community. Because as long as this nexus is there, no well-wishing people can work properly for concern of their safety. Thank you.
Okay. So Ravi, I just have a question in connection to what Vladimir ji said before we get on to Manushi ji's question. So Vladimir ji, in two parts, is this the reason why European Union has taken a keen interest in the Manipur violence? That is part one. And part two, why is it that China is keen on preventing India from accessing oil deposits in the southern part of Manipur, especially in the districts of Churachandpur, Tamenglong, and Jiribam, where there are inhabitants that belong to the Kukizo people? Isn't it unfair to India that the oil exploration responsibilities that were handed over to a Netherlands-based company while our own ONGC was neglected? What is your take on that?
This is a very commonly used strategy. I would like to draw your attention to Assam, Lampi, Kamrup. That area is home to an estimated 9.2 million tons of 0.104 grade uranium, which is very good, considered to be one of the best grades uranium for working, for power generation activities. So this thing also we see similarly the European Union being weaponizing the church to prevent any activities going on there. We see locals' houses being burnt. We see horrible atrocities on Okhomia and Gorkha people there, all carried out at the behest of the American Baptist Church and the Evangelist Church. Here the church bodies might change, the names might change, but the strategy remains the same. Yes. So this thing not allowing to explore, this has been a very common theme of USA and China. Any power will not allow you to develop in a region. Northeast is a dream for these people. That accepting the chicken neck has been one of our biggest errors, geopolitical blunders in 1947 as well as 1971. And in future, if any further conflict happens, this is the first thing which we should look to correct, the chicken snake. This has given them a dream of having a region with diverse ethnicities connected with intersolated from other parts and having its own unique interpretation of dharma and culture, which has been followed by communities for millennia with a very strong ethnic interest. This is a dream for anybody. And they're exploiting it to the best they can. So yes, these kind of oil exploration and things, this is going on. And also China, what it is trying to do is that it is trying to create a sphere of influence into Burma and trying to create its own access to the Indian Ocean. So it is trying through Burma, it is trying through Pakistan. So the BRI, they are trying different branches there. And the Rakhine region through which they are trying, it is also very mineral rich region. That is also a very mineral rich region and a hotbed of conflict going. So it benefits China very much. And not just the Chinese state. Any conflict in the Northeast benefits the weapon delivering rackets which are present in the northern Shan state, mostly occupied, done by Chinese barons. So it's a triple way beneficial deal for them. They are doing what is beneficial to them. That is all we can say.
Thank you, Vladimir ji. Very disheartening to know this. Anyway, I'll move on to Manushi ji. Manushi ji, you had mentioned that there has been some kind of a confusion with regarding the Manipur of Mahabharata and the Manipur of present day, where they are insisting that what happened in the Manipur of Mahabharata is supposed to be in present day Odisha. So can you just clear that confusion so that people know where the exact location is?
Yes, yes. See, the Manipur is described in various ancient historical texts, including the Puranas, the Mahabharata, Vedvyasa's Mahabharata, Jaimini's Mahabharata, and only the Aswamedha part exists now, as I already said. Then in Burmese records and ancient Burmese chronicles, and also in foreign records, especially in Ptolemy's accounts, ancient Alexandrian geographer and mathematician. He has also described in detail about Manipur some 2000 years ago as being part of the Kale kingdom. The Kale kingdom then consisted of Burma, Manipur, and parts of Chinese territory. And this was mentioned 2000 years ago. This again confirms Manipur to be a part of the Northeast region. And Jaimini's Aswamedha Parva describes in detail about the Aswamedha horse moving towards various parts of the Northeast and then finally entering Manipur. So if the Ashwamedha horse had entered Orissa, then how come it would have entered Manipur in a short span of time? So Jaiminis Ashwamedha records about the Ashwamedha horse entering Rakkaspura and then entering Manipur. So Rakkaspura is again present Burma. And various other historical records, for example, the Ahum chronicles, especially the Tunkhungya Buranji, describes in detail about Raja Jai Singha. He is also known as Bhagya Chandra, Rajashri Bhagya Chandra. He was like he had a conflict with the Burmese. There were several battles, and he won few of the battles, and a few of the battles were won by the Burmese. And when he lost to one of the battles, he took refuge in Assam. And his daughter Kuranga Nayani was married to the then Ahom king Rajaswar Singha. And while offering his daughter's hand in marriage to the Ahom king, he introduced himself as a Kshatriya, as a descendant of Babru Bahana, Kshatriya prince Babru Bahana. That again attests to the fact, to the evidence that the Manipura described in the Mahabharata is the Manipur of the northeast, not the Manipur of Orissa. Again, if we only the name is an affinity, there are various names across the country that bears affinity. For example, Udaipur. Udaipur is in Tripura. Udaipur is in Rajasthan. Udaipur is in the south. There are various regions across the country by the name of Udaipur. Similarly, Manipura, there are various names, but geographically speaking, Manipura being part of the northeast is evidenced by various historical records, right from the Mahabharata, various Puranas, foreign records, including ancient Burmese chronicles, Tunkhungya, Buranji, and many other more texts. And the Jaya Samhita describes Chitrangada as a Gandharva princess, which again, because the Mahabharata has not described which dynasty they belonged to. It is the Jaya Samhita, again an ancient text that describes Chitrangada as a Gandharva princess, which means Raja Chitravahan and his ancestor Raja Prabhanchan were all Gandharvas. And the Mahabharata also describes about Raja Chitrangada from the Kalingan part of Bharat. So there might be a confusion between Raja Chitrangada and Princess Chitrangada. So I have described all of this in detail in my book, in our book, in the first section. And then if we consider the cultural affinity, like all of our pantheon of our ancestral deities are all from, they're all the descendants of Arjuna and Chitrangada. And we worship all of these deities. Our culture, our ethnicity, our food habits, etc. bear affinity to Arjuna and Chitrangada. But present Manipura in Orissa is a very small town. It is in Kendrapara district of Orissa. It doesn't have any affinity with the Manipuris described in various ancient texts and even in Ahom records.
So, in connection with this, Manushiji, you had mentioned about the culture. Have you found in any of the other states a culture as similar to Manipuris? Like, which other state in India bears a lot of resemblance to the culture of Manipuris?
Primarily, we are all like among the Hindus also, we all know about the various sampradayas, and we worship the pantheon of deities, where some are Vaishnavites, some are Shaivites, some are worshippers of Shakti. But again, there are almost all the Hindus worship all of the pantheon of Hindu deities. Similarly, the Manipuris, Vishnu is the principal deity. Vishnu and all the avatars of Vishnu, Krishna, and Jagannath, they worship with great pomp and show. They worship all the avatars of Vishnu. And likewise, we see in Orissa, Jagannath is worshipped. And in the south, across the country, we see the Vishnu being worshipped in various names across the country. And when we, about food habits, we see that in Assam and most parts of the Northeast, they bear, the food habits are somewhat similar with the southern part of the country. We all consume rice. Rice is our staple food. So similar in the south, rice is the staple food. We also use banana leaves for consuming the rice, especially on auspicious occasions. And similarly, in the south also we see use of banana leaves. So likewise, there are many more cultural affinities between Manipuris or people of Manipur with the rest of the country.
Lovely, Manushiji. Thank you so much. Ravi, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, my question is to Ankitaji. This was one of the questions I reserved to ask. We have talked about why there was not an intervention in Manipur earlier, and all of a sudden, something that I noticed as I'm curious about political activities and everything. Once the presidential election in US is completed, the Trump became the president of US, and suddenly there is an action in Manipur. The Manipur act, there is the army movements over there. Suddenly they have taken control of the regions, and there is like Vladimir mentioned earlier, there is a stalemate and everything. All these things happens once, or the Indian government actually went ahead full force on Manipur once the presidential election in US was completed. And my question is, how it is related to that? Is just a coincidence, or is there a connection?
Yes. So actually, about the current situation. I mean, so immediately, like just a few months after the US presidential elections, the central government took over, declared president's rule. But as I said, president's rule, as I mentioned in the very beginning, it has only brought about. It is only a temporary measure, and it should not be seen in direct connection with US as such, because sporadic incidents of violence, they have reduced, but free movement across the state, especially on the highways, that is still restricted, despite directives from the Union Home Minister Amit Shah. And extortion, arms and drug smuggling, they still continue. Intimidation of civilians, they still do continue. And there was a certain there was of course a certain degree of negligence on the part of the government immediately after the violence began, and there has been this negligence over the years as well, that continue to embolden so many different militant groups that that get funds from outside, which is no more a secret, and that poses a full-blown threat to the very integrity of the Indian state and democratic institutions. Even now, even after the elections are over, but we have several reports indicating how Kuki militants under suspension of operations, they were among the first to initiate firing and attacks against innocent Meiteis and Meitei dominated villages. But it was only in retaliation that the Meitei community took up arms in self-defense. And following calls by Ajay Kumar Dhalla, the governor of Manipur, for disarmament, Meitei groups have largely complied. They have also surrendered a substantial number of weapons, but Kuki groups, they have surrendered very few, as confirmed by daily releases from the Manipur police. Their so-called village volunteers, they still have access to sophisticated arms and weaponry. They continue to defy the law. And this lawlessness has not spared even high-ranking officials. So nothing very much has changed on the ground, I would say. Like, for example, I remember this incident when Supreme Court Judge Justice Koteshwar Singh, who hails from the Meitei community, he was prevented from entering Churachandpur by the local bar association earlier this year. And despite being a judge of the apex court, his entry into a part of Indian territory was blocked solely because he is not from a certain community, solely because his entry was blocked because he's a Meitei. So, and as I mentioned, several Christian Kuki Zoo organizations, they have issued warnings to the native Manipuri Hindus against the observance of their age-old sacred rituals. So these are direct assaults on the Hindu culture and civilization of Manipur. The people of Manipur, they deserve peace and justice, and they need to be assured. Most important is that they need to be assured that their futures are secure, that their futures will not be hijacked by terrorists, or their future it's not going to be ignored anymore by the apathy of the authorities in power. So this current period of president's rule, it must not become a passive administrative phase. It should serve as an opportunity for the government to not just restore the authority of the law, but also rebuild trust among communities and most importantly, dismantle the power structure of the drug lords and the cross-border militant groups that are funded from outside. So this network has to be broken and completely demolished forever. So only then long-term peace can prevail. So our book actually offers an alternative perspective in this regard, bringing into focus the geopolitical dynamics in several chapters, both in the second and the third sections. And so it has also questioned the various simplified interpretations that we see in many different writings on the Manipur violence, because many writings they refer to the issue as, okay, so the violence erupted because the Metis were demanding for ST status, or it is a conflict related to discrimination of tribals and all of that. But our book has tried to delve deeper into the historical and cultural aspects that have often been neglected in the context of the Northeast. So we hope that the facts become accessible to a global audience, especially the geopolitical issues, the Bangladesh crisis as well, which we have covered in some detail in one of the chapters of the book, so that readers can actually comprehend what has been going on in the Northeast for a long time now, whose hands have been behind the insurgency, the Naga insurgency, the insurgency in Manipur. So it is an attempt on our part to bring out the background, actual timelines and events which culminated in the deadly violence in Manipur, because the world has been inundated with a false narrative perpetuated by the other side through various platforms. All that we seek to do is to dispel these falsehoods and reveal the truth by correcting certain narratives that were spread worldwide since the beginning of the violence. And most importantly, it is it is about protecting and safeguarding the Hindu culture and civilization, the Dharmic culture and civilization of Manipur, that is gradually declining year after year. And this is something which we hope that the Indian government will honestly do. And I think that's all I have to say.
All right. You mentioned drug trade as well. So how is it exactly directly connected with the violence and the drug trade? How much of the violence can be attributed towards the drug trade?
Very much, because they all work in a cohort. The narco terrorists, that is the drug lords, the illegal immigrants, they continue to endanger the peace and security of the state, and their influence is everywhere, as I mentioned earlier, in civil society, politics, cultural in the cultural arena, law enforcement. So we have two different chapters in the book, one on narco terrorism, the entire history of the drug trade in Manipur and the Northeast, and illegal immigration. These are separate chapters, but both are connected. So that both these chapters try to establish the point that illegal immigration, narco terrorism, insurgency, they all are interconnected. And it is happening, of course, with the blessings of foreign powers. And the abnormal, if we look at the abnormal population growth rate of immigrants in Manipur and the expansion of poppy cultivation in the state. So this is something which is a matter of serious concern, because land grabbing, controlling the economy, especially in places like More and Churachandpur, while throwing out the native populations from their homelands and influencing administrative policies. These people dominating the electoral politics of Manipur, especially in the hill areas, and destruction of forests, causing destruction to the ecological harmony. All these are interconnected. To to the twin problems of illegal immigration and the drug trade, which is leading to the displacement of the indigenous population and their villages every year, year after year. And this trend has been continuing in Manipur since the colonial times. So it is very much connected, and we need to read it in the context of the current conflict. We need to read these issues in unison.
Very well. Thank you for clarifying that. Over to you, Vidya.
And also that I'd just like to make one point. So when you are talking about the drug trade, actually, most importantly, what we need to remember is that in the context of because we are talking about the drug trade in the context of the current violence. So the demand for a separate administration. So who are these people who are demanding the establishment of a separate homeland? What is the separate homeland? Is it a separate Christian nation? And who are these people? These are the people who are demanding, who are raising these calls for a separate administration. If we look into their history, we would understand that these people were migratory by nature. They never owned any ancestral land in Manipur, neither did they own any ancestral land in any of the northeastern states. And history is witness to their trajectory of migrations and violence. They were forced to settle in an administrative circle, and they were forced to abandon their migratory habits in the modern era. But the inner behavioral traits of migration, or their migratory traits and of occupying and settling in the lands of native inhabitants, these traits did not entirely vanish. So over a period of time, it led to conflicts over encroachments in the lands of the indigenous landowners. So these people who are today raising the call for a separate administration, they have had a bloody history of conflicts with almost every single tribe and community in the Northeast. Most of these have been related to land and conversions, and they had been preparing since a long time to take over lands in Manipur, though these attempts have failed time and again. So this time, the only way that remained for them was to start physical violence. They started physical violence, and immediately they started shifting all blame to the government of Manipur, and they transformed their war crimes and acts of aggression into a so-called ethnic clash by provoking the indigenous people of Manipur. So, in order to achieve their preconceived goal of a separate homeland, they followed the strategy of establishing control over the narrative. So they began propagating lies after lies, lies of victimhood through paid media houses, in the name of being minority, in the name of being tribal, Christian, and whatnot. So they were trying to prove in every way possible that they can never live at peace with the indigenous people of Manipur. So that should serve as a cause to fulfill their demand of a separate administration. So this is something which is deeply problematic and deeply serious, and also stands against the spirit of democracy and the modern society. That's all.
Yeah, so in connection to what Ankita ji said, Vladimir ji, this question is for you, because I'm getting it from the part of where you have written. Departure of deities, you have mentioned one chapter. How a 5,000 plus year old dharmic ecosystem was reduced to rubble. that definitely has a connection to what Ankita ji has just said. Can you just elaborate on that?
Yes. We have often been seeing videos of a destroyed Shiv Mandir near Kobru Lekha circulated in social media. We also see people, Mount Kobru being desecrated with a cross by pastors. So we see these kind of things. And this question comes repeatedly, why Mount Kobru? Why the region? What is the contention with it? First thing is that the Kobru forms a part of a dharmic ecosystem. This dharmic ecosystem, there has been a lot of efforts to promote animism as a separate entity from Hinduism. This is, and the existence of dharmic ecosystems like Kobru prove it a lie. It shows the coexistence of different interpretations of dharmic faiths coexisting together. So we see native faiths and so-called traditional Hinduism. I am putting it under huge inverted commas. So this is the leftist perspective that Hinduism and Janajati's culture is different. These things prove that narrative to be a fabrication. So we had sacred groves called Umanglai, dozens of them. We had sacred forests, the Kangpokpi, Kanglatombi forest, KK forest. We had the Kobru Hill ranges. So these sacred hills and regions, initially what happened was that there began jhum cultivation. Then with the increase in Kuki cultivation population, we see the jhum cycles being reduced increasingly to increase profit. This is way before poppy cultivation became mainstream. This I am talking during the 90s. There was not even any ethnic clash between Kukis and Meiteis at the time. There was Kukis were clashing with Nagas, Tamilians, Gorkhas, these people. More side was the burning point. So what we see was that we see a systematic disregard for nature, a systematic disregard for the very basic civilizational values followed throughout Bharat. That nature is sacred. We have to preserve nature. Presence of deities, believe in the concept of Abirbhav or manifestation of deities. Believe that nature is the home of deities. The world is their home. They too have, although they are much superior, but they visit sometimes in some form or other. Blatant disregard for these values we see. Then comes the poppy cultivation, the large scale cultivation of poppy. And ironically, before this conflict begins, even Kuki IPS officers, we have put quotes of them. They too were telling alarmingly how the church tells it one mouth they will oppose that thing but not take any action. On the other hand, there are allegations of various non-Sioux groups and the church collecting funds from these drug trade are going around. So it's a very some nasty rumors at the very least. Even if I tell very conservatively, these are some pretty nasty rumors. And the amount of people who are willing to accept this fact, irrespective of community, makes it just does not. There has to be some truth in it. Let's just say it. Otherwise, we cannot find that much consensus across communities. Next thing is that what we see is that when poppy cultivation began, we see systematic destruction of forests, destruction of groves, land grabbing, blatant targeting. What brings the situation worse was that the testimony from Kobrulekha Shiv Mandir, Purohitji, Bhavananda Sharma and his wife. What they say is that as the population increased, the Kobru Hills became the home, one time dharmic sites became the home of terrorists, terror camps they became. And they would come repeatedly. They would harass devotees. They would one time they would put their children on gunpoint. They tried to choke them to death while demanding extortion, entering their home at night. They would repeatedly, one of his family member, Bhavananda ji was kidnapped and his wife was asked for extortion money. So we see dedicated attacks on people with a special kind of hatred reserved. What we say, the special kind of hatred reserved for people who do not follow their faith. So extortion, it would be wrong to say that they only extorted non-Christians. No, terrorists extorted everybody. But there was a special amount of hatred reserved for people not belonging to their ethnicity or to their religion. So both of these angles were there. Then we see the land grabbing rackets. How Maharaja Bhagya Chandra, I think, he gave the land in 1931 to Kobrulekha Shiv Mandir, Sevaite family for their. How that land was illegally occupied, Devatar property, even in the name of Devatas. And then how systematically land encroachment happens. And I find a eerie similarity in with what happened in Pakistan or what happened in Bangladesh by Islamists. So this is what the chapter shows, how An ecosystem was worn down by a decades of coordinated campaigning, by attacking the environment, by attacking devotees, by attacking sites of worship, and finally that led to the large attacks, the destruction of temples, bulldozing in May 3rd. That was the final blow. So this is the departure of deities. I call this chapter the departure of deities because even when this kind of problem was going on in Churachandpur, Guru Mayam Tomba Sharmaji, he was willing to die. Everybody fled, he did not flee his devotee in Mandoplekai. When this kind of problem was going on, Kobrulekasi Mandir, when they were burning down the entire temple complex looking to murder their family, Purohit ji told his family to go, but he did not want to. He stayed in a bush nearby. He was like, I have to see what happens to the deities. I have to record this. I have to restore the temple. So this is dharmic devotion at its best. So that is, I find an eerie similarity to what Meenakshi Jain says about how our predecessors preserved culture. So I see that same determination present at least among the dharmic people in our generation. So that is the reason I called this chapter this.
Thank you, Vladimir. So, Manushiji, this is again to do with Vishnupriya Manipuris. Apparently, there's been some kind of, people tend to have a confusion with respect to the identity of Vishnupriya Manipuris, confusing them with Bengali Hindus. Why does that confusion arise?
Yeah, actually, the confused lot, they are not at fault, because the truth about our historical roots have not been told. This is same at the national level also. See, we have been under foreign rule for say 1300, 1400 years, but not consistently. Our ancestors, our warrior ancestors, they offered resistance and they won battles. Many of them won the battles, many of them lost. So continuously they offered resistance. But these stories of resistance, these stories of valor have not been told to us in our textbooks. And these stories of valor are not easily accessible to us. So we, most of the youth in the national context, they do not want to remember the last 1000 years of history, because they feel that it is a history of defeats. It is a history of surrendering to the invaders, that our ancestors, they did not offer any resistance, they surrendered. Because this is how the narrative has been set through our textbooks. So this is same at the regional level also. And when we consider the ancestral history of every region, or the Vedic history, or say the Mahabharata period, the Ramayana period, and various other periods, the Upanishadic period, the chronological structure, etc., all of this have not been again told to us through, whether it is through textbooks or whether it is through easily accessible mainstream books. So many of the youth consider Ramayana and Mahabharata as mythology, and most of the Western historians, they have dated the Vedic period to have started from 1500 BCE, whereas our Puranas and various other ancestral texts, including the astronomical details described in the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, and even such details in the Vedas, these details tell us that our civilization is at least 17,000 years old. So the Vedic era dates back to around 17,000 years. And the Mahabharata period dates back to say 8,000 years. Similarly, the Ramayana period dates back to 8,000 years. The Mahabharata period dates back to say 5,000 years, more than 5,000 years. So likewise, there are various dynasties. For example, the Chola, Chera, Pandya dynasty, they are not new dynasties. They existed since the Vedic period. Likewise, there are many dynasties that consistently they ruled from the Vedic times. Similarly, if we see the history of Manipur, they see the rulers, they ruled since they continued their rule since the Mahabharata period. Even the Meiteis, that is the Ningthojas, who were earlier known as Mangangs, there is a separate chapter in the first section of this book about the Ningthosas, because there were 5 main clans. So each clan had a time. They were very popular. They were very powerful during a particular period in history. The Khumals were the earliest rulers, were very powerful in Manipur. And the last most powerful rulers were the Ningthosas, that is the Meiteis. So they have their hold now. So again, about the ancestral deities, about the history, nothing has been told to the masses of Manipur. So in the regional context or at the national context, we are not aware about our historical roots. That's the reason there are trolls. They speak out anything without any knowledge. And this is again not their fault because we have not been told about our roots. That is the thing.
Yeah, Manushiji, in connection with that, we've heard you had quite a few trolls when you tried to when you are describing or putting the details of the book, especially on Twitter. Is it okay to ask you to share a few details on what sort of trolls that you had to come across?
The main focus is again the same thing that you pointed out, that the Vishnupriya Manipuris are actually not Manipuris, they are Bengalis. So they are like they're stealing our culture. This is what they say. Again, this is again only because they are not they do not have any knowledge about their roots. If they had this knowledge, about their historical roots, they would not have told all of this. Because only the language is different. Otherwise, everything is similar. The food habits, the culture, the rituals that we observe, our ancestral deities, the pantheon of deities we worship, everything is similar. So there is a Krishna temple for every 15 to 20 Manipuri families in every locality, whether it is in Manipur or any other part of the country. For example, in Assam, I belong to Upper Assam. I born and brought up in Upper Assam. So there, for some 20-30 families, there is a Vishnupriya Manipuri temple, Krishna temple. But again, there is also a Meitei temple for the Meiteis there. And we worship Krishna in the Meitei temple as well. And the Meitei Manipuris, they also come to the Vishnupriya Manipuri temple. So there is no such discrimination amongst the Meiteis and Vishnupriyas outside Manipur. Though the confusion is there to some extent in Manipur. So once the root is clear, once they know about their roots, there will be no such confusions again. And that is why this book is so important. Because in mainstream narratives or even historical data about Manipur is not easily accessible. So in this book, we have like there are some more than 100 references. If we consider the whole book, there are more than 100 references. And they can go to the original sources to find out the facts. Besides our book.
Definitely. Thank you, Manushiji. Well described that. Coming to Ankita ji now. Ankita ji, you had mentioned about the conflict between the Kukis and the Meiteis, and especially you have mentioned about the Naga Kuki animosity. Can you throw some light on that? Like how affected? Yeah. Go ahead.
Kukis and Nagas, who are the Nagas, the indigenous, one of the indigenous inhabitants of Manipur, they have had a history of conflicts. Their history has been such that they have never been together. They just cannot stay together. So in this context, the focus of that chapter on Naga Kuki animosity, on the history of Naga Kuki conflicts, our focus has been to bring out the truth in the public domain by deconstructing the Kuki propaganda. Was there any Kuki rebellion in 1919, as they say? So for this, you need to read the book. So we have also focused on certain inconvenient historical truths in this context, like who, where, and who are outsiders. So like who are foreigners, that is who are foreigners or who are immigrants by virtue of not possessing any ancestral land, like the Nagas or the Meiteis or the Vishnupriyas possess in Manipur. So these people's claims of indigeneity, these claims have been closely examined with respect to their cherished political project of an imaginary homeland, of a separate homeland. And we have also explained how certain actions of the government of Manipur have posed obstacles to their realization of this separate administration project. Actions such as crackdown on land encroachments, poppy cultivation, and illegal immigration. So when we read it in the context of the history of the Naga-Kuki conflict, we would be able to clearly understand and connect the dots as to why the Kuki-Zo people have had a history of conflicts with numerous tribes and communities in not just Manipur, but also across the Northeast, across different groups and communities in Assam, with the Karbis, with the Dimasas, in Tripura, in Mizoram, with the Riangs. So these people have had a bloody history of conflicts and violence with so many indigenous communities and tribes of the Northeast. And this chapter on the history of Naga Kuki animosity sets the stage for understanding this this bitter violence. Why these people have always they have been fighting over land and resources, because not many people outside the Northeast might be aware of the fact that the Kuki Chingzo people have orchestrated more than 10 major attacks on the non-Christian indigenous tribes of Manipur, Tripura, Assam, and Mizoram since 1990. And their objective behind these attacks has been to occupy their lands and change the demographic completely of that region. And in most of these attacks, in most of these violent episodes of violence, the religious sites, temples mainly, of the indigenous inhabitants, they were targeted and destroyed. And there is hardly any community in the Northeast with which they have no conflict at all. I think that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Amritaji. Vladimir ji, the next question is for you. This again, it comes down to the victim testimonies. Can you throw some light on the victim testimonies, especially the first the eyewitness accounts, the ones which forced you to make a data of all the atrocities that has been done? Which one moved you the most? Which one was?
It's very unfair to say that one victim testimony moved me the most.
Yeah, I totally.
How do you even answer that question whether I had the misfortune of talking to Hirojit ji, whose family member, including an 8-year-old child, was gang raped until her hip bones fractured, and that news was not allowed to brought up. Postmortem reports were held back, all in the name of bringing peace. 5 other family members were found floating in pieces. Do I tell that? Or do I tell another victim whose house got burned and who and her desperate child was put on gunpoint at Torbung, 1.5 kilometers ahead, with security personnel a stone's throw away? Nearly. They are trying to rescue them, but they were far away. It was nearly like so far yet so near. So it's very difficult to tell, but what I can say is that unfortunately the victim testimonies were like what I expected them to be. I was not really surprised. The nature of the atrocities which we see, the systematic dismantling and other things. The initial atrocities of the brutalities didn't surprise me much. I expected something like this, unorganized mob violence, then there will be slowly strategic organization. Extremists and armed terrorists would slowly start filtering in. Large mob violence will lead to coordinated military strikes like that, small team strikes. That was expected. What really surprised me was the suffering in the relief camps. In the initial 6 months, the suicides, the many mental depression cases and suicides, and the highway blockade, and the desperate efforts for various organizations to reach and establish contact, but the failure due to long established isolation and lot of other vested interests among local politicians and other groups with vested interests. That was the one which really surprised me. We did not just take testimonies of victims in that sense. We took testimonies of people who suffered also and are suffering also. This our suffering part, the aftermath part, is what left me really surprised and a bit fearful, frankly, about where we are going, what is our future, what should society do other than build independent institutions to tackle this crisis, political institutions. These are some questions which have been raised in my mind very prominently, seeing that. Thank you.
Vladimir ji, in connection with this, apparently there are 72,000 plus Manipuris in camps. Could you throw some light on their conditions?
The food condition has improved, but the real problem is that their ambition of anybody in camp, they will have an ambition of getting back to normalcy. That is becoming very difficult to fulfill because due to the highway blockade, it is becoming nearly impossible to establish viable economic models or viable livelihoods for people. So there is a lot of mental stress, mental trauma. Many people, family, women and men are living separately in camps. They were at least until recently under cramped conditions. So those are leading to a huge amount of trauma, and some amounts of exercising people are doing. People are trying their best, and the conditions, I have to say, they are improving. Not ideal, but they are improving. Not like the previous ones. The previous, when we say the initial violence, More people had to stay in a camp nearby for 9 days, use the leaves from trees and water from the nearby Khujairok river with some food. Churachandpur also, the mini secretariat camp, they were being fired upon. It's much better than that, but we are the fourth largest economy on the world and with one of the strongest militaries. So I think this situation, it's time we show that a bit. Because free access, I think, is a prerequisite. Because why this hill valley divide was brought in? Because if you divide the hills and valleys of Manipur, so called, Imphal Valley and hill, and the rest of the hills and valleys, it's not even hill and valley. What they divided was the Imphal Valley and the rest of Manipur, including hills and valleys. If you do that, neither can survive without the other. And we see that there is immense suffering throughout Manipur. So this British nefarious strategy, we are seeing it work even nowadays in independent Bharat. So this is a major issue. I would say highway freeing should be a precondition and free movement in Bharat, even if it costs us disproportionately. Because without that, I do not see a viable way of restoring these many people into their forget previous livelihood, into even viable livelihoods, product-based livelihoods. So I hope that answers your question to a certain extent. If you have any specific questions about camps, I would be glad to answer it.
No worries, Vladimir ji. I know this itself must have been so difficult for you to, I'm sorry I had to ask you this question, but I want our audience to know about the situation there. So as much as you can speak up, as long as it is not going to put you in any kind of trouble, please come forward. And anything else you want to add to this, we welcome all three of you. In case we have missed out on something, anything important, we really, really want you to speak up.
Yes, the Manipuri society is a very well organized society. So now there are well defined points of contact for help and relief work as well as for further academic purposes or visiting purposes. And we would be glad to help anybody who wants to take up any such activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Vladimir. Ravi, any questions? I have one question which is for all three of them, but before that, if you would like
Just
to
go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Suji.
Okay, so this is equally to all three of you. Some light, at the end of the tunnel. What do you think are the solutions that we can go ahead with, which we can focus on to help Manipur out of this crisis, Manipur and the Northeast out of this crisis? Manushiji would like to go ahead. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a dedicated chapter on the solutions, and this has been described in detail, both temporary as well as permanent. And the government and even the people themselves, it pertains to law, so the government needs to come forward and offer permanent solutions. See, when we consider Kashmir also, see, in 1990, the exoduses happened. Before that also, several exoduses happened. But in Jammu, there are still many thousands of people who are in camps. They are not being able to go back to their homeland and settle in their homes. Their homes have been occupied. So this is happening in Bengal also. And this situation should not continue in Manipur. It should not continue in all of these states. So going by the condition of Bengal and Kashmir, I see a bleak future for Manipur, but if the government is determined to provide solutions, because see, all of these regions, whether it is Bengal or Manipur or Kashmir, these are all border states. And so there should be permanent solutions. Otherwise, these problems will linger on and the problems will remain forever. So I'll ask maybe Ankita and Vladimir will describe more about the solutions for Manipur.
Go ahead, Ankita ji.
Yeah, most importantly, to add to what Manushiji said, I think the youth of the Northeast, they need to be integrated at the cultural and societal levels. See, people's religious identities, they cannot be altered easily. But the current government's emphasis on the various cultural and civilizational linkages to make the northeastern youth a part of the larger Bharatiya identity, that is something which is commendable, I would say. And a strong emphasis on the similarities instead of differences, that should be the way forward to construct an inclusive identity. And this is something about which I have spoken earlier also. For this purpose, the three-language formula of language learning can be adopted. So, like, it can be along with the mother tongue. Any of the 22 official languages would be made compulsory for students to learn in the Northeast. And the English language can be ranked third in terms of preference. So, like during the schooling years also, there should be intercultural exchanges between the students of the northeastern states and other states of Bharat, so that it can foster better understanding of the various regional cultures of the country and also let them adapt easily to the larger Indian society without feeling any sort of alienation in the later stages of their life. And the beautiful culture, the beautiful cultural panorama of the northeastern states, that also needs to be portrayed more through both the mainstream media and social media as well, so that it generates more awareness about the multifaceted cultural dimensions of the Northeast. That the the culture of the Northeast is not different from the uh, from the uh, from the culture and civilizations that we see in the rest of the country. So in this regard, social media and other modes of communication can bring to the notice of the people the continuous onslaught that has been going on the indigenous people of Manipur since a long time now. So the media can be used to highlight the civilizational threat faced by a vast majority of Hindus across the country, because this will also put a lot of pressure on all political parties who want or who are seeking for Hindu votes, because it is certain that Hindus from Manipur or anywhere else in the country, they cannot be given a raw deal anymore. So that needs to be awakened, that our identity and existence is in a grave danger. So what Yogi Aditya had also said, his Batoge to Katoge remark, that resonated quite well with the vast majority of the Hindu population of our country. And it had shown its results in the political battlegrounds of Haryana and Maharashtra. The recently concluded Mahakumbh Mela also, the biggest festival of the Hindus, Hindu unity, which was very much visible. So this awakening that Hindu identity and existence is in grave danger, that needs to be brought out, and that is surely going to bring in more solidarity for the cause of the Manipuri Hindus too in the times to come. And times are hard, definitely, but if we have survived this far, uh, we are definitely going to survive and thrive. And the government of India, in the context of Manipur, especially the Indian government, must utilize this entire period of president's rule to flush out militants from the hills and also advance the Act East policy at all levels, because Manipur stands at the center of Act East. So ensuring Manipur's direct connectivity with the rest of Bharat in a hassle-free manner, that is very important for India's economic development, because the more accessible the Northeast becomes for other people of our country to explore, the more this region will see a growth of its potential in increasing people to people contacts at all levels. And in the long term, as a part of the AFIS policy, the various Hindu places of pilgrimage in Manipur, like Kobru Lekha, which Vladimir mentioned, Marjing, etc., Marjing Hill, etc. So all these places can be connected through a dedicated religious circuit that can help revive not exactly revive, but that can help establish the link between the traditions of Manipur and the Northeast and the larger Hindu society of Bharat. And this will also ensure a steady influx of tourists and dedicated tours for people from other states of Bharat to explore the unique traditions and rituals of the Northeast and the history associated with these places. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Absolutely brilliant, Ankita.
And
Thank you.
the landscape
Vladimir
is
ji,
very
would you like to add anything? Oh, sorry, go ahead,
Yeah,
Mansi ji.
and Manushi
and
ji,
the landscape is
Yeah.
very beautiful. It is not only Manipur, but the
Yeah.
entire Northeast is very beautiful. So if there is if there are more details about the tourist destinations, about the beautiful places of the Northeast in mainstream media like social media, as Ankita says, and tourist destinations in government websites, tourist websites, then that will also generate interest in the people of the rest of Bharat to explore the beauty of the Northeast.
Definitely.
and some other solutions which I would recommend is first having a vision for this region. What we see is a lack of long-term vision. Where do you see this region in 20 or 25 years? There has to be a proper vision. And that vision has to be defined on the basis of common cultural and civilizational values. Other than that, you cannot stabilize a multi-ethnic society purely on the basis of common language or on the basis of an ethnicity alone. Bangladesh is a failed experiment which has cost 49 million lives, according to Shachi Ghosh Dastidar, Shobbhasachi Ghosh Dastidar study. Roy and others, if we combine, it goes higher. So this is a lesson which has to be learned because it's proving to be too costly in terms of life, in terms of destruction of culture, loss of heritage, loss of identity. So this is one thing. Second, when we are talking about it, there has to be anti-decolonization efforts there. Northeast, we have to remember this region has entirely been a guinea pig for conducting administrative experiments for the British. And unfortunately, those things should have been disbanded immediately. But that did not happen after independence. Now it's high time that this goes. So there has to be dedicated efforts brought in there. And finally, the education system. There has to be common platforms and educational systems which will portray the native history, bring pride to the to the native people, evaluate critically the different understandings and interpretations of their native history, and show how we are all one people having civilizational, common cultural and civilizational goals. Why do we need to resist Abrahamization? what happens, what is the price of it if we surrender to Islam or Christianity? Islam we are seeing to what is happening in Pakistan, Bangladesh. Christianity we are seeing what is in Africa. That part is visible. Everybody can see that. But being a geopolitical football, how dangerous it is, more than telling directly, it is better if the facts are given with different interpretations, paying full respect to native culture, and yet showing them the price of isolation. This has to be done. And with that, I think we can have some form of stability in the society. But all this for that, there has to be strict. The local people also have to take care that Manipur, one good thing which has happened is that manifestos have begun to dominate the political landscape, which is a very good thing. More manifesto based politics, more accountability from the politicians, more alternatives to organizations with vested interests who are actually unable to work because of fund or whatever limitations or other things. More alternatives to these are things where we need to build good forums, interconnectivity between different zones, helping each other. We do not need to have rigid hierarchical structure, but there has to be coordination. Like you guys have, like the Satyameva Jayate, you people have given us a platform. We are eternally grateful to you. This kind of collaboration has to be there across all platforms. With that, I think resistance can start. But still, Northeast solution, it will be a multi-generational effort. There has to be a lot of sacrifice. This is what my humble opinion is on this matter. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah,
well
if the all
described.
of the
Go ahead,
yeah,
Manju.
if
Go ahead.
all of the solutions described in our book are implemented, then there will be obviously peace in Manipur, not only in Manipur but the entire Northeast. But the solutions should be implemented.
We pray that it does that definitely happens. I'm not going to say in future. I'm going to say as soon as possible. And I must say, just listening to you all, it was. I'm feeling proud listening to you all. At the same time, it's like someone's dropped a granite stone inside. There's so much of heaviness. I don't know how you all faced all these facts that you all had to put together. I mean, I'm finding it difficult, just listening to you all. How much of trauma you all must have gone through watching this, and the people who have suffered. I have no words there. Absolutely no words there. I pray that this book reaches each and every Indian and anyone who loves Bharat. They should definitely take the effort, buy this book, gift it to people. That's the least they can do if they love their country. It's as simple as that. Because what's happening in Manipur today could happen to any other state. We are already seeing what's happened to Bengal and Kashmir. We do not want Manipur to become anything like that. So to protect that, to make sure all the other states are safe, our culture is safe, I think this book is very, very important. And we are indebted to the three of you for taking this kind of effort. Manushi ji, Ankita ji, and Vladimir ji. Truly Dharma Yodhas, every sense of the word. Thank you so much. Ravi.
And I would like to express my gratitude on behalf of my co-authors to Satyameva Jayate team, Vidya ji, Ravishankar ji, for giving us this platform to express our views about Manipur and about our book, The Manipur Conundrum. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. To take from actually what Vidya ji was saying, it's not about just buying the book, reading it, understanding it. It's about actually understanding it and then put pressure on our political system to have the right action. Because if you don't put any pressure, the things will not happen. So the more the people read, the more pressure it should exert on the political system to have some decisive actions in Manipur. As we are hearing, I'm also wondering, why the government is hesitating to do something solid over there. Why insurgency over there is not curbed. The way that they are actually doing with the direct corridor that we see. Similar action should be taken over there and bring the Manipur Valley into peace. So, and I salute all of you, all three others, for bringing these facts out. I know it is very heart-wrenching to hear that, like Vidyaji says. I may pretend to be braver than Vidyaji, but it's not very easy to listen to all of this. But having said that, SmJ will always stand with the issues in Manipur. Like Ankitaji know, we are always in support, and there will always be a platform for Manipur issue or any other issue that you would like to discuss. I convey my sincere gratitude and thanks to all of you. Continue your efforts in doing so. We are sitting somewhere in some other parts of the world and not knowing what is happening. So all of you are our ears and eyes, and what you write is what actually people know. So let Bhagavan bring more courage to you, and let your pens be more mightier, and bring all these facts out. So I convey my sincere thanks to all of you. Thank you for being here, and let's hope I immediately or as soon as possible, like Vidyaji mentioned, there should be peace over there. There should be some sincere, definitive action over there to bring the value to peace. Thank you.
And just before we end, please take a look. Can you see the book? Is the book visible? So the Manipur Conundrum, I request each and every one of you who's watching this video, please go ahead and buy this book. You should read it. You should pass it on to your next generation. Make sure that every Indian gets to know about it.
Yeah, the link for buying the book is in the description. So please utilize that. Thank you. I'm winding up at this point.
Yeah.
Satyameva Jayate.
Satyameva Jayate. Thank you so much.
Satyameva Jayate.